There is a new change to the Lane Kiffin offense that might make it even tougher to stop.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Rebel fans. I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're delving into a topic that I've been eagerly anticipating. It's 12 personnel or two tight end sets. With Ole Miss having Caden Prieskorn and Dae'quan Wright, Ole Miss is stacked with offensive weapons. I believe that Lane Kiffin and Jaxson can maximize the potential of this offense with these two Mackey Award watch list players in this Charlie Weis system. So stay tuned as we explore how this dynamic duo can elevate this Rebels offense to new heights. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. And a special hello to the everydayers and insiders who make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the channel. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or even Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy can hook you out and give you different perspectives on college football, the SEC, and even Ole Miss. So check it out. You know how I feel about perspectives. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, these sports just aren't sportsing the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. You know, anybody that has been an everydayer or an insider and has listened to my program over the course of the last year knows that I have been very infatuated with 12 personnel and thought that this was the way forward for Ole Miss's offense. Not necessarily changing the formation. Ole Miss is always going to be an 11-person personnel team, which is one tight end, one running back. That's what they're going to do. But as Ole Miss evolves, they do have the ability to do something a little bit else. When Charlie Weis Jr. and Lane Kiffin was at Florida Atlantic the last year, when they had Harrison Bryant and John Rain, they did use two tight end sets. This is something that the offense has done before whenever they've had the talent to do it. Well, this year with two Mackey Award winner watch list players in Caden Prieskorn and Dae'quan Wright, they definitely have the talent to do it again this year. You know, Caden Prieskorn, for lack of a better word, he got off to a slow start because of injury a year ago. He was injured going into the season. He played against Alabama, but he wasn't 100%. And he wasn't really right until later on in the season. Once November hit, he started to feel a little bit like himself. And it was culminating with the Peach Bowl that he had against Penn State, where he had 10 catches, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion as well. Caden Prieskorn kind of flexed his muscles in that game and showed what a force he could be over the middle of the field. And plus, he showed off quite a bit with as many one-handed catches as he did. Well, Ole Miss didn't stop there because they had Hudson Wolf coming back as a tight end. But Ole Miss wanted a little bit more, I think, as well. And they went out in the transfer portal and got Dae'quan Wright from Virginia Tech. Last year, he had 28 catches, 366 yards. Like I said, he's a Mackey Award winner, watch list type player as well. He is somebody that is a little bit different. He's 250 pounds as well, just like Caden Prieskorn, but he's a different type of wide receiver tight end. When you look at him, he's probably pass catch first over blocking. Not saying he can't block. I'm saying that his preference is probably that way. When you have Caden Prieskorn, who is more that all-around total tight end for Ole Miss. 12 personnel leads to a problem, though. And the problem is that this wide receiver group is potentially the best group on the entire team, with the exception of maybe defensive line. So if you go 12 personnel or two tight end sets, you're going to have to take a wide receiver off the field. And when you take a wide receiver off the field, you need to be able to do something very specific, kind of change the way it looks, change the tempo of what's going on, not do exactly the same thing with a little bit slower player, essentially. Whenever you get in 12 personnel or two tight end sets, it can be an empty formation, to where there's a 5 wide receiver look on the field, but you can have your tight end specifically placed in an area of the field that is designed to block a cornerback or a smaller safety, to where you have an advantage in the formation against the defense. 2 tight end sets. When I say 2 tight end sets, that does not mean that 2 inline tight ends. We're not talking 1985's football. We're not going to line up in the Maryland I in the backfield. I'm talking about specific personnel on the field to take advantage of the defense. That is what 12 personnel will do. And both of these guys are really good in the middle of the field. They're excellent players, blocking downfield against linebackers and safeties. And both of them can help you out. And they can help out Trey Harris. They can help out Deion Smith whenever he finally shows up. Can help out Juice Wells. Can help out Jordan Watkins. And the reason I want to point this out is formationally, you can set it up real similar to the last touchdown in the Ole Miss LSU game a year ago. When Trey Harris scored the touchdown, it was sprung on a play that Caden Prieskorn was split out, which he often is. He split out and he blocked a cornerback, and Trey Harris ended up walking to the end zone. That situation and balancing out your formation to where one of those players are on both sides of the formation will give you an advantage by balancing up the defense. Defenses usually put strength towards the tight end side. Wherever the tight end is where they're going to put the strength. If you can balance your formation with a tight end on either side of the formation, it's going to force them to be even a little bit more vanilla. Now, we're going to talk about what this means for the offensive line next. We're going to talk about what this means for the Ole Miss offense in the third segment. But as it sits right now, for explosivity and what you want to do, this obviously puts more toys in the toy box of Jaxson Dart. A year ago, 233 completions, 358 attempts, 3,364 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's over a 4-to-1 interception to touchdown ratio or touchdown to interception ratio. But the touchdown numbers are probably not as high as Jaxson Dart wanted a year ago. And a lot of that has to do with the makeup of the Ole Miss wide receiving core over the course of the season, and the fact that you were constantly dealing with a Quinshon Judkins type situation, that you had to give him as many carries inside the 5-yard line, because if he was unhappy, he was liable to hold you hostage the next week. That's just the way it worked. But Caden Prieskorn, Dae'quan Wright in the middle of the field. You have Trey Harris on the outside. If you get Deion Smith on the other side, again, I still think it is when, not if, but it's still going to take a little bit of time, and you're going to have to get ready as well. By the time Kentucky gets here, he'll be fine. He'll be ready to go, I think. But that should help Jaxson Dart as a passing quarterback in the red zone. 12 personnel is huge. Ask Rob Gronkowski about 12 personnel and what it can do to a specific defense. So many hybrid players are playing on the defensive side of the ball, to where a good tight end, a really good tight end, is a weapon for the offense. And Lane Kiffin has always been able to use tight ends. It goes back to his time when he was at Alabama with like O.J. Howard, and before he went down to Ford Atlantic and Harrison Bryant and John Rain. And then he gets to Ole Miss, and there was Kenny Yeboah. And there's just player after player lining up for Ole Miss at the tight end position. Lane Kiffin's offense knows how to utilize them because of the mismatches they provide. More players on the field that can provide those mismatches, that's a good thing. Now, you don't want to just put a tight end out there to put a tight end out there. You need a guy. You need a dude. And both Dae'quan Wright and Caden Prieskorn fits that bill. You'll have to see exactly what type of player they can be. But if you do this right, and the personnel matches up with what Jaxson Dart and this offense is going to be able to do, if you look at the strength of positions around this team, this offense has a chance to be infinitely more explosive, even though you took a wide receiver off the field. Everybody knows I'm a huge proponent of 12 personnel. I have been. Just honestly, my whole existence on this Locked On Ole Miss podcast, I like 12 personnel. And if Ole Miss can use it effectively, you're going to see an offense that can really be unlocked. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen today. Coming up next, we'll dive into how the Rebels' 2 tight end sets could be a key to protecting an offensive line that is big, but still they have some question marks after a year ago. So stick around. This is a strategy you're not going to want to miss. You know, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the sports wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing the way we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep these sports going whenever I want to. All I have to do is open up the app, dream up any bets that I have any day, and bet them, place them. Maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss and their over-under of 9.5 wins this season, or Jaxson Dart at plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. Now is your chance to do that. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel, start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. He gets you ready for an exciting city season on the gridiron with a discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the portal, NIL, and the new expanded playoffs and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. You know, 12 personnel is not just a beneficiary to the passing game. It's not just a weapon designed to make your offense a little bit more explosive, and Ole Miss using that is just going to be a purely offensive thing. It also helps out the offensive line. And a year ago, Ole Miss's offensive line, let's just say it was maligned. Now, it wasn't necessarily bad. It was fairly good. You don't win 11 games with a bad offensive line, okay? But relatively speaking, against Georgia, against LSU, there were some problems offensively. And a lot of that had to do with the Engage 8 and figuring out how to scheme up the protections and stuff like that. So Ole Miss saw that in this Georgia game and said, hey, okay, we need to get a lot better. We need to get a lot bigger. And Ole Miss went out and was very intentional in the transfer portal market in order to do that. They picked up Julius Buelow and Nate Kalepo from the University of Washington Huskies. They picked up Diego Pounds, the left tackle from the North Carolina Tar Heels. And Dae'quan Scott was picked up from the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. These players joined returners like Eli Acker, like Jeremy James, like Micah Pettis, Jaden Williams, Caleb Warren. Those players that were brought back, 4 out of the 5 starters, I do believe, a year ago, returned. So it's not a situation that the line was in bad shape, although it can be argued last year that Victor Kern was the best offensive lineman in the group and ended up being one of these stalwarts in the course of the season. And Victor Kern, by the way, is also largely responsible for Julius Buelow and Nate Kalepo being in Oxford right now to begin with. Victor Kern is a transfer portal addition. He more than did his share. But I digress. Julius Buelow met the media yesterday after practice and said that the first time in his career when he lined up next to Micah Pettis, there was somebody as big as him lining up at right tackle whenever he was a right guard. And that is interesting to me. Ole Miss is going to be big. They're going to be really big. Now, that's not a definition necessarily of good. They're just right now big because the problems that Ole Miss had a year ago, they can still show themselves. Jaxson Dart held the ball a little bit too long. A couple of times there was run pass misreads. The protections were a little bit wrong. There were some busts here and there. And because of that, at times the offensive line struggled, especially like against Tulane. There was a lot of bust in that Tulane game. And it was difficult to watch from time to time. Tulane was a good team. Don't get me wrong. Tulane was excited for that game. That game was their Super Bowl, but that game shouldn't have happened. Julius Buelow, Nate Kalepo, Diego Pounds, Jaxson Scott were brought in because of what happened in that game and because of what happened in the Georgia game. Whenever Lane Kiffin and John Garrison and Charlie Weiss Jr. saw the line of scrimmage and the deficiencies that they had from time to time, there's like, okay, we've got to do something. If we don't do anything, we're going to be stuck here, and this is going to be our ceiling. We are going to be Penn State forever. If we want to make the next step, if we want to elevate our program, we have to fix the offensive line. And like I said, it wasn't necessarily broken. It just needed to be fixed for Ole Miss to hit the level that they needed to hit. Now, Jeremy James has put on 30 pounds this offseason. Just about across the board, they've gotten bigger. And this offensive line is going to be one of the bigger units that Ole Miss has probably ever put out on the field. We'll have to see exactly what it looks like. And they alternate from time to time. They have a problem that during the spring, they were so afraid of a depth chart and so afraid of that spring transfer portal window that they went into fall camp a little bit behind the 8 ball. And I don't care what anybody says. They came in a little bit behind the 8 ball. Other programs knew exactly what they were going into in fall when Ole Miss was trying to figure out what was going to happen. And there's a chance that against Furman, against Middle Tennessee State, against Wake Forest, there's a little bit of shuffling on that offensive line. Not that that's a bad thing. Ole Miss's schedule allows this to happen. But it is something to keep an eye on. The offensive line that comes out against Kentucky, against LSU, might not be the same one that comes out against Furman. Coaches are notoriously slow decision makers. And because of what they did in spring, they intentionally did whatever they could to prevent a depth chart from being known to even the players inside their building. Now they're trying to figure all of that out. Now it gets real. As Ole Miss is about 2 weeks away from Furman. 2 weeks from tomorrow, Ole Miss will line up against the Furman Paladins. And you will see players go out there and start, and there's a good chance that it won't be the player that comes out the next week or the week after that. It's not going to look exactly the same because Ole Miss is ramping. They see the schedule. They see how it looks. They see fall camp. They're trying to avoid what's happening to Texas. For anybody that doesn't know, Texas has lost their starting running back for the year and the third string running back for the year. They have a backup and they have a guy that they moved from wide receiver. That is the Texas running back room. And everybody was talking about before the season about how Texas was going to be fighting for one of the 12-team playoff spots. Now it's a little bit less. They're a little bit shaky. And we need to see exactly how they look. Lane Kiffin is very intentional in approaching this, just like he has been in everything. He's intentional on the size of this offensive line. He is intentional on the players that are coming in to try and make their team a little bit better on the offensive line. But this 12 personnel, Dae'quan Wright, Caden Prieskorn, it's just another way that you can help out wide receivers and offensive line. It's another formationally thing that can make other teams think. This is in the system. This is something that Lane Kiffin runs. This is something that Charlie Weiss has run. Harrison Bryant and John Rain did this in 2019. Did this pretty safely. So we'll see exactly how it looks. Indeed. Should be a lot of fun. Coming up next, could Lane Kiffin and Jaxson Dart's offense be evolving beyond the need for the tempo tricks? We'll break down why the Rebels might not need to rely so much on speed this season. Game Time is your place to get all your Ole Miss tickets, with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. There's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, but through Game Time, you can see exactly what the view is from every seat in that stadium before you check out. Lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, job loss protection. Basically, they have the customer service suite to hook you up, to give you that peace of mind before the game. So take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might be able to help you out with tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, an interesting situation. We talked about the 12 personnel thing and a way that we could consider what was happening. And a lot of that has to do with the number of toys and the amount of toys that Lane Kiffin actually has at his disposal. Ole Miss's offense over the last couple of years has been very tempo oriented. Whenever they were going fast and everything was going good, they could make explosive plays. They functioned. They operated as a well-oiled machine. Whenever they tried to slow it down, go into a 4-minute offense type mode, they struggled from time to time because Ole Miss's offense, in order to go fast, has to be simple. It does. It has to be simple to make people perform at a very fast level. That's just the way it goes. The harder and more complex an offense it is, the more time that you're going to have to take to make it more complex. So whenever we start talking about 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, when we start talking about changing personnel off the field and 5 wide receiver sets over the course of this season, it's telling me one thing. Ole Miss might be able to rely a little bit less on the tempo gimmick this year. Now, it's not going away. Ole Miss is still going to run tempo as much as they can. That is how the framework of their offense works. But teams like Alabama recently, teams like Georgia, the teams that are out there, it doesn't matter what they do. There's not a gimmick in what they do because they have better players than you do, which means they can go slow. And it doesn't matter if you can diagnose what they're going to do because you still have to stop it. And they're going to have a 230-pound running back and a 340-pound offensive lineman or a 350-pound defensive lineman that can run like a deer. Georgia are going to have those type of players. Ole Miss needed the gimmick in years past. They needed the tempo. They needed the surprise. They needed the deception. Think about it like this. When the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire split up towards the end of their empire, and they started kind of fighting amongst themselves to where Eastern Romans and Western Romans became a thing, reputations emerged. Western Roman Empire soldiers chose to deal with their problems head on. They lent themselves to brute force. They did whatever they had to do. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire was more built off of deception and kind of fooling your enemies and stuff like that. The SEC over the last couple of years have been really similar to that as Ole Miss's rise has happened. Ole Miss has functioned more like the Eastern Roman Empire when Georgia and Alabama would just bludgeon you. That's how they preferred to do it. They wanted to see a problem directly, deal with it, and move on because most of the time they had better players than you do. Ole Miss needed deception. Ole Miss needed tricks. Ole Miss needed the tempo gimmick. This year's a little bit different. Offensively and defensively, the talent on Ole Miss's roster this season is at a level that I have not seen in my 48 years of life. Whenever you think about what they can do and what they can have, you're like, man, there's literally 10 players on the offensive line that can play, legitimately play, to the point where 4 years ago, there would be maybe 4 and you were trying to figure out, it's like, okay, we need to hire this position. If we can get away with that and we can stay healthy, we have a chance to win 8 games. You know, that is where Ole Miss came from. This offensive line's 10 deep. There's 4 running backs, 3 quarterbacks, 7 wide receivers, 9 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, enough safeties you can't shake a stick at it. Is absolutely nuts. There's players all over the field. And because of that, Ole Miss can function like the Western Roman Empire used to do. You can deal with problems straight on. You can fight. You can bow up. You can directly handle problems, and you do not have to rely so much on deception to make your offense work. So I do think in 2024, Ole Miss, in summation, is going to see some 12 personnel. I do think Ole Miss is probably going to run tempo a little bit less. I think Ole Miss is going to be more successful in the 4-minute offense. I think Ole Miss is going to be more successful in the red zone. I think you're going to see different formations and personnel groups depending on the situation of the game. Game states. You always hear me talk game states. Game states are going to be very important for Ole Miss. Now, between the 20s, they're going to go really fast. They're going to go as fast as they can. You're going to go inside zone, inside zone, inside zone. It's going to look very familiar as an offense. But as Ole Miss needs that special, whenever stops happen and Ole Miss can do things that where, okay, there's the 2-minute warning because this is the year of the 2-minute warning and Ole Miss is on the 25-yard line. Maybe Ole Miss immediately puts the extra tight end in the formation, takes out the slot receiver, lines up Dae'quan Wright as an inside type wide receiver. You can see how this offense is going to be effective for Ole Miss this year if they can just make it work. You have to be careful not to do paralysis by analysis, but the tools are in place to make this offense very, very effective. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. You know, we pride ourselves on having the most comprehensive perspectives out there, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. For the second listen of the day, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. He'll get you hyped up for an exciting season with in-depth discussions on the upcoming games, which are right around the corner. Next week is game week for the ever-evolving landscape of college football. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. Heck, I'm probably doing 8 updates a day right now on there, and we're having a good time trying to have one-on-one discussions and all that of the insiders on the program. So enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports Now. Howdy toddy, everyone. Have a good weekend.